She said 3 words in the family chat and her cousin lost it. But was she actually wrong for calling him out? Imagine finding out your family member is about to light a grenade and hand it to his girlfriend. Not metaphorically. Legally. And then imagine watching him post about it publicly, on the family group chat, like it is the most normal thing in the world. That is the moment she was in. And all she said was 3 words. 3 words. And somehow she became the villain. Let me take you back to where this actually started, because the group chat moment was not the beginning of this story, it was just the part that finally forced everyone to stop pretending they had not seen what was happening. Our narrator here is 29 years old, and her cousin is 33, which matters because we are not talking about a college kid with a wild idea. We are not talking about someone fresh out of school who genuinely does not know better, who has not yet learned the difference between ambition and recklessness. We are talking about a grown adult man who has been in the working world long enough to know exactly what he is doing, long enough to have signed employment contracts, long enough to understand that those contracts mean something. At a family gathering, casual, relaxed, probably over a meal where everyone was in a good mood and the conversation had that warm, easy energy that only exists when a family is genuinely comfortable with each other, he laid out his entire plan. He was going to start his own business. In the same industry as the company he currently works for. Using the client list and product data from that company. And he said it out loud. In front of everyone. Like he was announcing a vacation. She told him right then and there that what he was describing was a conflict of interest. She told him he could get sued. She told him the smart move was to quit his job first, build the business clean, and then launch it without any legal exposure. Picture the position she was in during that moment. This is a family dinner, not a boardroom. Nobody came there to discuss employment law. She could have smiled and nodded and changed the subject like everyone else at that table probably did. Instead, she chose honesty, and she chose it knowing it might make the air in the room uncomfortable. That is genuinely good advice. That is the kind of advice people pay lawyers and business consultants to give them, and she handed it to him for free, across a dinner table, out of nothing but concern. He listened, nodded, and then did absolutely nothing with it. So fast forward to the group chat. He posts a link to his new business Facebook page and asks everyone to like and support it. And here is the thing, under normal circumstances, of course you share that. Family supports family. If your cousin is building something, you celebrate that. You comment something encouraging, you hit the like button, you share it to your own page because that is what you do for people you love who are chasing something. But this was not a normal circumstance. This was the business he had already been warned about. The conflict of interest business. The one he had been told, clearly and specifically, could expose him to legal consequences. The one that could drag his girlfriend into a lawsuit because he put everything in her name thinking that made it invisible. And now he was sitting there in the family group chat, cheerful as ever, asking everyone to pile on and support, completely unbothered by the fact that at least one person in that chat knew exactly what this business was built on. That last part needs to sit for a second. He put the business in his girlfriend's name. Think about what that actually means for her. She may have agreed to it. She may have trusted him completely, the way you trust someone you are building a life with, the way you say yes to something because the person asking you has never given you a reason to say no. Or she may not have fully understood the risk she was absorbing. Either way, she is now the legal face of a business that was conceived, planned, and operationalized by a man who is currently employed by a direct competitor. His reasoning was that if it is not connected to him directly, the company he currently works for cannot trace it back. And look, on the most surface-level reading of the law, there might be a technical argument there. But that is not a clean solution, that is a liability shield made of paper. A very thin piece of paper. If his employer can demonstrate he used their client data, their contacts, their proprietary information to build a competing business, and in most of these cases they can, the name on the registration is not going to protect anyone. It is just going to ensure that his girlfriend gets named in the lawsuit alongside him, except she will be named first, because her name is on everything. She said as much in the group chat. She told him it was still wrong. And then something interesting happened, which is that her parents came after her instead of him. Think about how that must have felt. She had watched the notification pop up, seen the link, recognized immediately what this was, and made the decision that she was not going to pretend along with everyone else. She typed a response, probably more measured than what she actually felt in that moment, and posted it. And then instead of her cousin having to answer for what he built, she was the one fielding messages. The message she sent, her verbatim words, was, "And I want you to really absorb this, that is still wrong." That is it. 4 words if you count the contraction as 2. No profanity. No public humiliation. No detailed breakdown of intellectual property law. No screenshots, no receipts, no dramatic call-out post. Just a short, quiet, factual sentence expressing that his behavior had not improved since the last time she warned him. And her parents told her she should have messaged him privately instead. Here is where I need to pump the brakes for a second, because this particular piece of family logic deserves some examination. The argument being made is that calling out bad behavior publicly is somehow worse than the bad behavior itself. Let that sink in. He posted his shady business publicly on a group chat that includes younger cousins who are watching and learning from the adults in the family. He invited the whole family in. He asked for their participation. He made it a group event. She responded to that public post with a public comment. The platform was his choice, not hers. The audience was his choice, not hers. If he wanted to avoid public feedback, he had the option of not publicly asking his entire family to promote his legally questionable business venture. That option was available to him right up until the moment he hit send. I cannot overstate how important the younger cousin's detail is here. She mentioned it herself, and I think it reveals something really significant about her reasoning. This was not just about protecting her cousin from his own bad decisions. It was not just frustration or a need to be right. It was about what message the family was collectively sending by liking that page, sharing it, cheerfully supporting it without a word of caution. Kids and teenagers notice which adults in their family get held accountable and which ones sail right past consequences on a cloud of group chat likes. When the adults in a room go quiet to keep the peace, the younger people in that room are still paying attention. They are cataloging what gets celebrated and what gets ignored. They are building their understanding of what the adults around them actually believe versus what they say they believe. If the adults in a family silently validate something because speaking up feels awkward, the younger people in that family learn that silence equals endorsement. They learn that as long as you are charming about it and frame it as hustle, you can do shady things and the people who love you will clap. She did not want to be part of that lesson. And honestly, she should not have to be. Now let me talk about the private message argument one more time, because I keep coming back to it. Her parents said she should have handled it privately. But she already did that. At the family gathering, before any of this went further, she pulled him aside, she told him her concerns, she looked him in the eye and gave him real and actionable advice that could have genuinely protected him. She gave him a roadmap out of the problem before it became a problem. And he ignored it completely. He walked away from that conversation, had weeks or months to sit with what she said, and then proceeded to launch the business anyway, publicly, and ask his family to cheer. So the idea that a private message at this stage would have accomplished anything is a fantasy. It is a very comfortable fantasy for people who want the conflict to disappear without anyone having to do anything, but it is still a fantasy. She already tried the quiet route. He walked past it like it was not there. What I also find interesting is the way her cousin responded to her comment. He did not defend the business on its merits. He did not say she was wrong about the legal risk. He did not say he had spoken to a lawyer, that he had found a way to do this cleanly, that he had thought it through and had a plan. His entire response was essentially, "It is in her name so it will not come back to me." Read that again. His defense was not that the thing was okay. His defense was that he had arranged it so that he personally would be harder to hold accountable. That is not the response of someone who believes they are doing something ethical. That is the response of someone who knows exactly what they are doing and has decided the workaround is good enough. And that tells you everything you need to know about where his head is at, and how little he is thinking about what happens to his girlfriend if this unravels. There is also something worth noting about the power dynamic at play here. He is 33. He is the older cousin. In a lot of families, the older generation or the older cousins carry a certain social authority, an unspoken seniority that does not need to be stated because everyone already feels it in the room. Pushing back against them publicly, even gently, even with 4 measured words, can be read as disrespectful, as overstepping, as a younger family member forgetting their place. She is 29, she is younger, and she had the nerve to say in front of the family that what he was doing was wrong. That disruption of the expected order is probably a big part of why this felt embarrassing to him, and why her parents framed their response the way they did. Because on some level, even if they could not articulate it this clearly, the issue was not really about the group chat. It was about the social hierarchy being disturbed by someone lower in it calling out someone higher in it. But here is the thing about that. Social hierarchies do not protect you from lawsuits. His age and his status in the family do not make what he is doing legal. And the discomfort of being called out in front of people does not compare to the discomfort of watching your girlfriend get dragged into litigation because you decided not to listen when someone warned you twice. Let me also address something that I think gets lost in the noise here. She asked the question at the end of her post, did I overreact by sending that message? And I want to sit with that question for a moment, because the fact that she is even asking it tells you something about how successfully the family has managed to redirect the discomfort away from the person causing it and onto the person naming it. She is the one second guessing herself. She is the one replaying the moment and wondering if she went too far. And what strikes me is how measured the actual message was. She did not write a paragraph. She did not tag people. She did not post screenshots or documents or legal definitions. She wrote 4 words, and those words were factual. The situation was still wrong. The fact that such a restrained comment is being framed as an overreaction tells you something about how much the family had already been bending over backward to avoid this conversation. It tells you how far the bar had moved. When the truth, stated briefly and without cruelty, lands like an attack, it usually means everyone else has been working very hard to make sure the truth stayed quiet. Okay, verdict time, and I am going to be direct about this. She is not the asshole. Not even a little. She warned him privately first, he ignored it. He then invited the entire family into the situation by posting on the group chat and asking them to actively participate in promoting his business. She responded with 1 sentence. A sentence that was accurate. A sentence that caused him 0 financial harm, 0 legal harm, and the only consequence it had was mild social embarrassment. The kind that is entirely self-inflicted when you ask your family to publicly endorse something you already knew was questionable. Her parents, while probably coming from a place of wanting to keep the peace, are wrong here. Protecting someone's feelings at the expense of their future is not kindness, it is just delayed consequences. If no one ever says anything, he continues down this path, the company he works for eventually notices, his girlfriend gets named in a lawsuit, and then everyone in that family is going to sit there quietly wondering why nobody said anything. Well, one person said something. She said that is still wrong. And she was right. The real embarrassment here is not the group chat message. The real embarrassment is a 33-year-old man asking his family to clap for him while he walks into a legal disaster he was already warned about. If that stings, the answer is not to silence the person telling the truth. The answer is to not do the thing that warranted the truth. His dad refuses to come to the wedding unless they change the venue, so should he have to help pay for it? His father will not walk through the door of the wedding venue unless it is a different venue. Not because of anything the bride did. Not because of anything the groom did. Because the venue happens to be his ex-wife's house. And now someone else has to pay to fix that. Let that one settle in for a second. So here is the full picture. The couple has been planning their wedding for months, and his mother stepped up with a genuinely wonderful offer. Her backyard. And not just any backyard, a picturesque space with a pool, strung with the kind of natural charm that most couples spend thousands trying to manufacture at rented venues. Completely available, no booking fees, no venue minimums, no catering contracts, no deposit check written with a grimace. She offered it herself, freely and warmly, the way a parent offers something when they actually want to help and not just appear helpful. The couple was initially hesitant because nobody wants to impose on someone else's generosity. Nobody wants to be the reason a family member's home gets turned upside down for a weekend, but eventually they said yes, and the whole plan came together beautifully. The bride's parents, who carry their own complicated history with money and financial anxiety stemming from a bankruptcy filing years ago, were visibly relieved when the venue question was answered without a price tag attached. You could probably see it in their posture, that particular exhale people do when a weight they have been bracing for just quietly disappears. Weddings are expensive in a way that defies all reason, in a way that feels almost designed to make normal people feel inadequate, and this arrangement meant they could breathe and actually enjoy the process instead of white-knuckling through every budget conversation wondering what the next line item was going to cost them. Everything was working. And then the father became a problem. Now, to be fair, the mother had a feeling this might happen. She actually pulled the bride aside privately and voiced her concerns before anyone had even approached the father, which says something about how well she knows the situation she once lived inside. She mentioned that the divorce between her and his father had left wounds deep enough, and apparently tended carefully enough by the father himself, that he and his own mother had refused to attend their son's graduation party and their daughter's sweet 16. Specifically because both events were held at the mother's house. Let that land completely. He skipped his child's graduation party. He skipped his daughter's sweet 16. Not because he had a conflict. Not because he was sick or traveling or dealing with something genuinely urgent. Because going would have meant setting foot in his ex-wife's home, and he decided, each time, that his discomfort was more important than the milestone his child was marking. So the mother's concern when this wedding plan came together was not paranoia or pessimism. It was pattern recognition built from years of watching the same man make the same choice whenever his own feelings were in competition with someone else's important moment. The groom went to talk to his grandmother first, and apparently she surprised everyone. She was warm, she was open, she seemed to have genuinely moved on from whatever she had been holding on to since the divorce. That is actually a significant and meaningful thing, because by the bride's own description, this grandmother is loving but not usually someone who releases a grudge easily or quickly. She is the kind of person who remembers, who keeps score not out of malice but out of a deep sense of loyalty and injury. So the fact that she sat with the groom and came around, that she looked at her grandchild's face and chose the relationship over the resentment, is not a small thing. It suggests that when people in this situation are given a real conversation and treated with genuine respect, they are capable of doing the hard and gracious thing. That makes what the father did next feel even more deliberate, even more chosen. The father said no. He will not come to the wedding if it is held at the mother's house. Full stop. No negotiation, no counter-offer, no acknowledgement of what this decision costs anyone else. And the groom is now stuck in an impossible and deeply unfair place, pulled between really wanting his father present on one of the most significant days of his life and knowing that moving the wedding means uprooting everything they have planned, costing real money that real people will have to produce, inconveniencing vendors and guests and family members who arranged their lives around the original plan, and essentially rewarding behavior that by any reasonable standard is completely unreasonable. The groom did not create this corner. He is just standing in it. I just want to say something out loud here. This man skipped his own child's graduation. He skipped his daughter's sweet 16. And now he is threatening to skip his son's wedding. At what point does someone in this family say to him plainly that the one with the problem here is not the venue? Because here is what is actually happening beneath the surface of all the logistics and the money conversations. The father has decided that his comfort, specifically his discomfort at the idea of seeing his ex-wife in a home she shares with her new wife and seems genuinely happy in, is more important than being present for his son's wedding day. He is presenting that discomfort as a fixed condition, as something immovable, rather than something he is personally responsible for working through like an adult. The bride even articulates this herself with real grace. She says she understands on some level that seeing your ex thriving in a life that moved on without you can be genuinely painful. That divorces carry feelings that do not always resolve cleanly no matter how many years pass. That is a generous rate of a man who has given her very little reason to be generous. That is more grace than the father is extending to anyone else in this situation. And then the bride's father said the quiet part out loud. If they are being asked to make an accommodation this significant, to change venues, to absorb costs they had planned around not having, to upend an arrangement that worked cleanly for everyone except one person who refuses to manage his own emotions, then that one person should be offering to help pay for it. Honestly? That is not an unreasonable position. That is cause and effect presented as plainly as it can be presented. Let me lay out the financial reality clearly and without softening it. The bride's parents were always planning to cover the majority of the wedding costs. The venue being free was not a windfall they pocketed or a luxury they stumbled into. It was relief from a genuinely significant expense that they were prepared to carry but were grateful not to have to, the kind of relief that changes how you sleep at night in the months leading up to an event you care about deeply. If the venue changes, that relief disappears entirely. They are back to paying for a space that has to be booked, often far in advance, with all the deposits and fees and minimums and contracts that come with it, in a market where wedding venues are almost universally expensive and frequently unavailable on short notice. And the reason they would be absorbing that cost is not because of anything they chose or any preference they expressed. It is because one man decided his pride was non-negotiable and then waited for everyone else to rearrange themselves accordingly. And look, I want to be careful here, because the instinct to avoid asking a future father-in-law for money is real and understandable and deeply human. Nobody wants to start that relationship with a financial confrontation. Nobody wants the first significant conversation between families to be about who owes what. But there is a meaningful difference between asking someone to chip in on shared expenses out of a general sense of fairness and asking someone to contribute to costs that exist entirely and specifically because of a choice they made unilaterally. This falls clearly into the second category. The father is not being asked to help fund a wedding out of obligation. He is being asked to take some financial responsibility for the disruption his refusal is actively causing other people. Whether the groom is the one to have that conversation or the bride introduces it carefully as a suggestion is a tactical question, and one worth thinking through. And I think the bride is right to be thoughtful about how she brings it to her fiancé, because the groom is the one who has to carry this relationship with his father long after the wedding weekend is over. But the underlying logic is sound and does not really bend under scrutiny. You do not get to be the reason something costs more and then remain a passive bystander in the conversation about who absorbs that cost. Now, is there a version of this where the father says yes, contributes, and everyone moves forward? Sure. Is there a version where he says no, they have the wedding at the house anyway, and he misses it the way he missed the graduation and the sweet 16? Also possible, and perhaps clarifying in ways nobody has wanted to say out loud yet. Is there a version where this conversation goes badly and damages the relationship before the wedding even happens? Unfortunately, yes, and that is a real risk worth naming. These are all live outcomes. But the bride and groom did not create this problem. They had a plan. It was a good plan that worked for everyone who approached it in good faith. One person blew it up. Asking that person to reckon with the consequences of their own decision is not being an asshole. It is being honest about how choices work in the real world. The grandmother came around. She did the hard and loving thing. She sat with whatever she had been carrying and she chose her grandchild's happiness over her own resentment, and in doing so she demonstrated what it actually looks like to love someone more than you need to protect your own wound. The father could make that same choice. The fact that he has apparently decided he will not should tell everyone a great deal about what his relationship with his son has really been built on. Because a parent who genuinely loves their child finds a way to walk through a door they do not like if it means standing there while their kid gets married. Here is where I land on this, clearly and without hedging. The bride would not be an asshole for encouraging her fiancé to have this conversation with his father. Not even close. The father made a unilateral decision that has real financial consequences for other people. He has done this before at other family milestones, and the pattern is not subtle. There is a documented history of him prioritizing his own comfort over his children's significant moments, and now he is doing it again at the most significant moment of his son's life so far. Asking him to contribute financially to the solution he is forcing is not punishment. It is accountability. If the father wants to attend his son's wedding, he has everything he needs to make that happen. He could choose, as the grandmother chose, to walk through the discomfort and show up for his kid. He could offer to help cover venue costs without being asked, as a genuine gesture of wanting to be part of the day. He could do 100 things that center his son instead of himself. The fact that his apparent answer is simply no, and he is waiting for everyone else to rearrange themselves around him, is something the groom and his bride are under no obligation to quietly accept. They can ask. They should ask. And however he responds will tell them exactly what they need to know going forward. Some parents make their children feel loved on the days that matter most. And some make their children feel like an inconvenience that requires management. The father is at a crossroads right now between which of those he wants to be. The bride and groom just need to make sure they are not the ones paying, financially or emotionally, for him to stay stuck on the wrong side of it. Drop a comment below telling me which story hit harder for you today, and if you made it this far, a like and subscribe would genuinely mean a lot.